What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're going to be talking about some of the exciting developments hitting the Warhammer 40k community. We finally have a new model for Leagues of Votann, the first one to come out for them, I believe, since their army was released in 9th edition. Obviously, we did have some kill team releases for them, but nothing that constituted a full unit. This does kind of look like an alternate sculpt for an N here champion, though, so I guess a little bit less exciting. But the bigger news is we do have some confirmations from Warhammer community about the new Space Marine Codex. And I'll cut to the chase here. It looks like in some cases, it's actually getting a lot worse. That's kind of the trajectory for Space Marines usually with new editions. Oftentimes they come out of the previous edition looking pretty strong, and then they get an early Codex release that isn't quite as good. That's how that happened in 9th edition, and I believe in 8th edition as well. So let's talk about what exactly is inside this Warhammer community article and the changes that are coming to the Space Marine faction. Now, this article does discuss two of the new detachments coming out in the Space Marine Codex, that being the First Company Task Force, as well as the Firestorm Assault Force. The First Company Task Force is focused heavily on Terminators and veteran units, whereas the Firestorm Assault Force is focused more on close-range fire support. They're going to be trying to shoot close-range weapons like flamers and bolt storm weapons at you and grant buffs to those weapon types. Now, the big change here, and the reason that we're talking about the Codex being maybe nerfed a little bit, is that there has been a transformative change to Oaths of Moment. This is the Space Marine Army rule that allowed you to choose an enemy unit and get full rerolls to hit and wound against them in each of your command phases. You can use other abilities to get multiple instances of Oaths of Moment and use it to deliver devastating alpha strikes or take down a particular enemy targets, or even just shore up the damage output of your weaker units to make sure that you have a good blanket of damage across your opponent's entire army. It was an incredibly useful and powerful ability, and really shored up Space Marines having kind of mediocre, relatively jack-of-all-trades weapon profiles. Now in the new Codex, Oaths of Moment will only reroll your hit rolls. This was a change that was rumored in a couple different places, but we are basically getting confirmation of that in this article. Now, that is obviously a huge nerf, but they are getting more powerful detachment abilities to shore things up. So rather than the sky falling right now, while I do think that this is enormously transformative to the faction, it probably means that we see more of a shift towards weapons that reroll their own wound rolls, like twin linked weapons, but we will also see some other buffs from these new detachment abilities. The first detachment to talk about is the First Company Task Force. This includes a new detachment role, which basically gives you back your old Oaths of Moment, but only once per game. In your command phase, once per battle, you can choose to get wound rerolls against the Oath of Moment target, in addition to hit rerolls. Definitely not quite as good as getting full wound rerolls for the entire game, but it's nice to see that rule return in at least a little bit. Not much of a consolation prize to Space Marine players, though. However, it does seem like this detachment is focused on being incredibly tanky. This includes enhancements like Iron Resolve, which allows the bearer to get a 5+ feel no pain, and once per game after being targeted by an attack, extend that to all of the models in their attached unit. You can also stack that with the legendary Fortitude stratagem. This allows Terminator or veteran squads to reduce the damage of weapons in units charging them by 1. It's unknown whether or not this will stack alongside other damage reduction effects, so if we see units like Deathwing Knights stay the same and retain their own built-in -1 damage, we could potentially be reducing incoming damage by 2. Obviously, there is a minimum of 1 that you can reduce incoming damage to, but that does mean that even 3 damage, things like Deathwatch Thunderhammers hitting them, would only be doing 1, which you can potentially then shrug off with Iron Resolve on a 5+. Definitely feels like this attachment is going to be incredibly difficult to deal with, and if we see some of the Terminator units that are very popular in the metagame right now continue to be played, it's going to be incredibly strong. Whether or not it's better than Gladius Task Force, that remains to be seen, because it does look like Gladius Task Force is remaining relatively unchanged, and the combat doctrine effects from that are some of the strongest attachment abilities in the entire game, and especially for slow units like Terminator. So there is going to be some legwork to be done by these other detachments to beat the old classic GTF, but if they're able to do that, it's going to be a lot more variety for Space Marine armies. Speaking of variety, we also have the Firestorm Assault Force. This is focused on close-range weapons, and especially things like flamers and short-range bolt weapons. It gives every weapon in the army assault. which is super good. Not only does that let you extend your threat range on your ranged weapons, but it also allows you to advance and perform actions, even on your utility units, things like scouts and infiltrators. That already is super good, but you also get +1 strength when targeting enemies within 12 inches, specifically with ranged weapons. So unfortunately, it doesn't work on melee, but it will pump a lot of your strength 4 or strength 5 weapons up to 5 or 6, and those are big break points, especially for clearing infantry and damaging lighter vehicles. That is already a super powerful detachment ability and really shores up units like aggressors, which I think with the change to Oath's Moment are already going to be played relatively often. Now we do get a couple other really quick tidbits about this detachment, including the War-Tempered Artifice enhancement for one of the characters in the Firestorm Assault Force. It grants all of their weapons +3 strength, which, honestly is pretty good. You can get relic chainswords on Gravis captains, for example, up to strength 8, and their larger power fists can get up to strength 11, which are pretty solid strength values. Honestly, you can't be too upset about that. That is a solid enhancement, and it's probably going to be one of the cheaper ones if I hazard to guess. Within their preview video, we also saw a preview of one of the stratagems for the Firestorm Assault Force, this being Burning Vengeance. This allows you, after your opponent has resolved shooting attacks targeting one of your transports, to disembark one of your units and shoot that offending enemy unit as if it were your shooting phase. This is incredibly strong on, again, those units like aggressor squads who can dive out of transports and open up with flamers or boltstorm gauntlets into enemies shooting into them. And because it's not Overwatch, they don't hit on unmodified 6s. It's just a normal shooting attack. So they have the potential to do massive damage, especially firing at your Oaths of Moment target. Now, also in this video, unrelated to the Firestorm Assault Force, we also see a confirmation and some new rules from the Anvil Siege Force. This is the more range-oriented heavy weapon detachment in the Codex, and it looks like a lot of the rumors surrounding this detachment are true. Grants all of your weapons heavy, so a slightly different shade from the Firestorm Assault Force that grants you assault. In addition, if your weapon is already heavy, then you will also gain an additional benefit, and if the rumors are true, that is an additional +1 to wound. So any regularly heavy weapons will be getting +1 to hit and wound when remaining stationary, whereas everything else will get that +1 to hit when they stand still. On top of that, we also see some enhancements, one of them being for Gravis models that allows them to respawn when killed. So this is a Phoenix Gem style ability. This is incredibly powerful on a Gravis unit, particularly because they are already difficult to remove. Usually having half damage and high defensive stats, that means that these guys could lose their unit, get killed, stand back up, and still be pretty reasonably difficult to kill by themselves on the table. On top of that, we also see Fleet Commander. Not sure what this one does, but it looks like it is an orbital strike style of effect where you choose an area of the table and could potentially do some mortal wounds surrounding it. Now, we do get a little bit of a confirmation in this article about Gladius Task Force. They do mention the return of Armor of Contempt. This is the 1 TP stratagem that Space Marines have access to reduce incoming armor penetration characteristics by 1, and they do mention that it is present across all 6 of the Space Marine detachments within the Codex. Now, this is interesting because we didn't see any sort of standardization like that across the Tyranids Codex, which was just released. And it looks like the Space Marine Codex is going to be fundamentally different. Not only are we seeing mechanical changes to the core rules of the faction, which we didn't see in the Tyranids Codex, but we're also seeing these stratagems that are standardized across all detachments, obviously, which reduces the mental load and just gives you some pretty solid baseline defensive buffs to Space Marines. It also means that playing against Space Marines, you can expect to be playing against an Armor of Contempt style reactive stratagem. So you can plan against your weapons, AP being reduced by 1, almost regardless of the type of power armor that you're shooting at. And with that, that is all of the news from the new Space Marine Codex so far. Huge changes to the Space Marine faction, and it's going to be a lot of work for these detachments to overcome the power of wound rerolls from that Oaths of Moment ability. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about this. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, and YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. I love you all. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.